All right, welcome back to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm so excited to have another episode here for you guys. I believe this will be episode 38. It has been a journey and a long time coming, but I appreciate all the support and love from the audience and people who have been following and also all the guests who have been on thus far. Um, I have a very special guest on today. We crossed paths via LinkedIn, and I did a little homework, and I'm just excited to hear, about her journey and her experience and expertise. So without further ado, I'm gonna have her go ahead and introduce herself.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome. My name is Anna Koehle. So I am located in Virginia, and I have been in the child welfare field for over 16 years. So I've done a little bit of everything in the field. I've been a caseworker. I have led state teams. I've led nonprofits. I've done federal technical assistance, and now moved into consulting. But on a personal side, I've also been a foster parent, and I'm an adoptive mom. So I have sat on both sides of the table in child welfare. So I feel that it's a calling. So I'm really excited to be here to talk with you a little bit about all that's going on in child welfare right now.
Definitely, definitely. Wow. Thank you first and foremost for all your work that you have done and just being a light, out there. Um, my first question, kind of just getting right into it, is where did all this begin for you? You said that this was your calling, so when did you feel that call come upon you?
Definitely. That's a great question. I remember in sixth grade, so I was about 11 or 12, we had to write a paper about what do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember I wrote my paper about being a social worker. And at that time, I did not know any social workers. I had never come into contact with social workers or social services or child welfare or anything like that. But it's just something that literally came out of me on the page. And so that's why I consider it a calling, because it had to be something divine, because I didn't know what that was, but I knew it was what I was meant to do. So it's something that I have pursued since that time. So through, even as a kid, volunteering in different ways, serving my community, serving other youth in the ways that I could. So it's just always been embedded in the way that I have lived my life since that paper in sixth grade. So yeah, that's where it all started.
Wow. So just to think, just from that time back then to now, wow. So if you could paint me in the audience kind of like a timeline of because I know you said you have been in many different positions and different areas of this arena. So if you can give me a timeline of um what those different positions looked like when you were doing them and what was the work, you know?
Yeah, so from my career started in 2005. So from 2005 to 2013, I was a caseworker, primarily in foster care and adoption, but my last role as a caseworker was doing some prevention work. So I've always worked, during that time I was working for the state, departments of social services, and really serving kids that had been, involved with DSS. Primarily, I worked with younger kids in my work. I usually had the kids on my caseload that were under 10, so a lot of little ones. And during that time in child welfare, things looked very different. The way we approached families, the way we approached the permanency goals, particularly reunification, many of those things just look so different. So looking back now, I'm like, oh, can I go back and do some of that again? Because wow, what we know now versus what we knew then looks so different. But that's where I started out. And from that time, I shifted into the nonprofit side of things. So did nonprofit leadership. I was an associate director and an executive director of private nonprofit agencies. So one was serving adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as children and youth in foster care. And then I was the executive director of an adoption agency that partnered with the state for some foster care adoption work. And then from there, my heart was in public child welfare, and I moved back into that with the state government, serving as the state program adoption program supervisor in Virginia, and really working to help preserve stories. So part of my role there, the most exciting piece that I did there was preserving the adoption records and ensuring that the adoption records dating back to the 1940s remain preserved with integrity. So when people went to find their story, they could find it in its entirety and it could be easily accessed for them. So I was able to work with our Attorney General to get some laws changed to get those records digitized so they weren't deteriorating in the way they were stored. Lots of exciting things there, but it was so important to me that adoptees be able to access their story in a way that was easy and in a way that really held that integrity. So that was a really exciting time in my career. And then from there in 2020, moved into federal technical assistance. So helping state agencies work through their program improvement plan as a part of their CFSR process. So really helping states learn how to do what they do better. And that was just so inspiring and exciting because I was seeing people, who are in the field and in the workforce, really empowered to make changes in the way that we serve kids and families. And then from there, like I said, I've been in consulting most recently. So really kind of very similar, helping states think through what they do and how to do it better. How do we keep kids out of congregate care? How do we ensure that children and youth who have severe mental health needs, how do we make sure they're getting the services they need? How do we reach families in their communities? How do we implement family first? Things like that. So I've had a pretty good run here, a pretty good variety of experience.
Definitely. And I know that is helpful for the audience because I have many different people in here. And one of the biggest reasons why, I started this podcast is to showcase the many different voices that surrounds our child welfare system, and our systems as a whole, and I just think it's really important and to not just showcase, the alumni, but also showcase the social workers, also showcase, the directors and all these different facets, because in order to get towards that change, which we have came a long way,
oh yeah,
a tremendously long way.
Yeah.
In order to get to that change, we need to hear from all sides and capture what are the issues, from all different sides, but bringing it back to, my next question, you spoke about your journey, and it kind of started around 2005. You've had, years of experience and seeing from a different lens, each time. What are the key things that you would say that you're passionate about and that you've seen change or that still needs to be changed?
That's a good question. Oh, there's so many things that I'm passionate about, but the things that really bubble to the surface for me is how we honor and how we bring families of origin into the conversation and into the decision-making process. One of the things that I saw during my time as a caseworker, particularly, with cases that were moving through termination of parental rights, moving to adoption, was that oftentimes fathers were left out of the conversation or kind of pushed to the side. And so part of my role with the state, thinking back, was also managing the Virginia Birth Father Registry. And that was really important to me because I felt that it was really important that fathers get a voice. So really bringing voice and bringing families of origin in, even in the situations that are yucky and that feel bad and that are painful, letting them be empowered to actually have active voice in that process, even if it's a case that's termination of parental rights. How do we still honor and respect families in that? How do we still preserve connections in that? That's something that that just gets me excited. I love having conversations around that. I love coaching organizations around how to do that better. So that's something that's really important for me. And then, of course, looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in our child welfare practice. How do we ensure that our workforce is addressing their own implicit bias that can impact safety decision making. We've seen research and data to say where there is a correlation there, and we all have bias. We all come with our expectations. We show up as ourselves, regardless of the circumstance. And so how do we help coach and train our staff to be aware of their own kind of blinders in order to make fair and equitable decisions about what happens to children and families? So that's another area that I am super passionate about, that I'm glad is getting to the forefront of child welfare now. And it's something that I get to do a lot of coaching around as well. So I love that work, because the more we can be aware, the more we can have these conversations, the better the outcomes will be for children, particularly Black and Brown children, where we know there is a disproportionate number of Black and Brown children in our foster care populations. We know there's disparity in outcomes. So the more that we get states and agencies engaged in these conversations, the better those outcomes will be. And that gets me super psyched.
Definitely, definitely. I completely agree. And I want to kind of go backwards to something that you said. You had some work and some hand with helping kind of implement family first and supporting people and organizations with that. Could you give me a little bit more, explain a little bit more to me about your work with that? Because, we've seen Family First, at least here in the state of Michigan. I've seen it be implemented in many different ways. And, we were a state that waited to like the last moment to kind of like, all right, now I guess we got to do this. And I personally, advocating and working, with policy makers and legislators and stuff like that, have seen there been some downfalls and implemented and some good things. I would say COVID has kind of had a good hand by bringing awareness to the disparities and issues surrounding the child welfare system, and has kind of lit a fire legislatively and policy wise within states and federal government. But one thing I would say, just kind of rounding back to that Family First, is there has been barriers, and I'm interested to see or hear more so what have you seen, and what have you had to work and support others with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Family First, it's so important, and it's timely. I know in some areas, some of the components of Family First have been a part of the practice all along. But in my role consulting, not in my home state, but in other states that I was working with, I really was doing kind of some of that very initial work of just getting the buy-in from the organization, getting the buy-in from the leadership to understand why this is important, and really pivoting the lens from, this is not something that you're just being required to do, but this is what needs to happen. This is the culture change that has to happen so that we serve kids and families and communities better. So it was really starting to build, just starting with that groundwork of why this is important, and how you do this, how you shift and manage change so that your workforce and your leaders in your workforce really can get behind, the programs and services that are a part of Family First. So a lot of my work was in that front end of getting organizations on board and getting state leadership on board around, here's what we need to do for your plan. Here's what you've already got going on that you can build on, because I think a lot of states have missed the opportunity of looking at taking a full environmental scan of everything that they have, all the programs and services across their states, of what's happening, to say, okay, here's what we've got. And if we just turn the needle just a bit, we've got it. We're moving in the right direction. And so I've been doing a lot of work around helping folks look at the big picture of what's going on in the state and saying, hey, here's a resource we have. They're already providing this service. If we just tweak it a bit, we've got that component that we need for Family First. If we just pivot just a bit, here's how we can get the workforce to, being more engaged in the community. So just little things like that, of building that groundwork. And that's very interesting to see, because this isn't new. This is something conversations we've been having for a while, but there's still places that they're still unsure about what this looks like and how to get it up and going.
Definitely. And what do you think has been the, how do I word this? What do you think has been the pushback, or, I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm gonna use that, the pushback with organizations or states, to buy into Family First, because most of us, has been doing this advocacy and working around this. We know that Family First is it's like any other legislation. It does have its kinks and stuff like that, but Family First was not, it isn't the all in all, make it better. It's not, and I don't know if that is what some people projected to these, organizations or whichever, but I in my time in speaking and explaining to people, and other alumni and organizations and stuff like that, kind of explaining like, this is what Family First is for, this is what it does, I've faced that, I don't know about this, or is it really helpful for us, especially for congregate care, because it does speak to a lot of preserving those families. And, some CCIs, feel like this is trying to move them out of business or whichever. So I'm interested in hearing what has been the pushback that you have seen, or the reservations. That's the word, the reservations.
I will say you hit the nail right on the head, is that you have these deep-rooted partnerships with some of the residential providers and congregate care providers, these deep, long-lasting relationships between child welfare agencies and these providers. And so it's really a delicate dance of trying to pivot and change services, but in a way that preserves that relationship. And many, of our service providers, in order to keep the doors open, in order to have staff to serve, they've got to generate revenue, and that's just a realistic part of it. It's a business, and so that, I think, is where the challenge that I have seen has come in, is that some child welfare agencies are getting that pushback from their partners, and it's really trying to helping them figure out, well, how do we navigate that? Because, oh, well, if we push too hard, then we're losing our resources, that we need for the placement of children or providing services. So I think that has been an area that I've seen that's been pretty tough for states to navigate. And then another thing is just shifting the mindset, really shifting the mindset. Child welfare, just in its design, is a reactive system. So we are really, Family First makes it be more of a proactive system. So that is really turning the whole field on its head, and so when you do that type of dynamic change, it's always met with resistance and uncertainty. And for workforce, they will follow leadership. And if leadership displays resistance to this, then that trickles down. So it really starts at the top of getting that buy-in from leadership to really push this forward. But that's what I've seen a lot of the hesitancy coming from, those partnerships that are deep, with providers, and then just that new approach to not being reactive to how we approach the safety and permanency and well-being of families.
Definitely. And that leads me into my next question, conveniently. And I will say this before I ask. There has been, like I said before, a lot of rally coming out of the brunt of COVID. And we're still facing some difficulties there, but the brunt of it, the shutdown, we all in our houses. I hope that is over. But coming out of that, there's been a lot of realizations, and I've seen a significant push towards reform committees, especially on efforts of prevention. One of the things that I see, like, we're having these conversations, but I haven't seen a lot of, okay, let's get in front of the communities, let's actively get out there to those communities where we're seeing high percentages of Black and Brown youth come into care. Let's go out, and that's something that I see differently in the child welfare system today. And I don't know if it's ever been a part, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, listener, or whichever, but that sense of, okay, this is going wrong. Let's get out there. Let's go talk to these people. Because I don't know if it's the same there, but in the state of Michigan, there's a lot of stigma surrounding around a social worker driving down the street in a predominantly Black or brown community. Like they see the insignia on the side and the doors shut, the blinds closed. They trying to take my kids, and stuff like that. And for me, prevention start with changing that narrative 100%. And getting into those communities. But I don't see a lot of state agencies or federal, talking about that kind of prevention, getting out there and changing that narrative and re-educating those communities and instilling support and resources in those communities so they know that human services isn't against them, that they're with them. But also, I've sat on a couple committees where there's been conversations about, well, when we get a call, about in a situation, and I'm gonna be very hypothetical because I don't know if I can say the whole situation, but when we get a call and there's a family that is Black or brown and stuff like that, it's automatically a check off. Or if they have been in foster care before, that's a check off for them too, because they're considered at risk, and stuff like that. So those kind of things I'm seeing, and they're actually true, because when I heard that, I was like, wow, oh, that's what we do. So I bring it back to my question. In your experience and expertise, what do you think, and I know there's not no one answer, but what do you think we should be gearing towards in prevention and supporting parents? And as we all know, sometimes situations deem that the kid needs to be removed completely, but there's some times where there's times where we as a system could support that parent better, to maintain or reunify that relationship, and that does not happen. So I'm interested in hearing your side of that.
Yeah. So, it does require such a change. And like you said, almost a re-education of what human services is, what child welfare is. And all of that comes down to relationships. Everything we do just in life, this is my tidbit, everything in life comes back to relationships. So how do we, as a workforce in human services, in child welfare, build relationships with communities so that there's trust there? And that's going to take a rebuilding, because I can think back when I was in my early days as a caseworker, you would build this relationship so that you could get the information to remove the child. It was a system that you built a trust and then you broke a trust. But how do you have a healthy relationship, maintaining that boundary and that integrity of the position, but having it be that human services is not seen in that way of, oh, they're here to take kids. No, we're here to help. And that requires an entire culture shift in how we approach people and how we embed ourselves in the community. Towards the end of my time as a caseworker, me and my coworker, shout out to Rachel if you're listening, we would just spend time with people. We would go sit on front porches with people in the communities where we knew people were and just talk and see what was going on and get to know people. So then when they saw us coming, people weren't fearful of us. They knew we were there to help. We responded to needs. If you need, material items, we can help you. We got you, and we just built those relationships, and that helped prevent several kids that we work with from coming into care. So it comes down to those relationships, but then it also requires us as a workforce to really understand the nuances between neglect and poverty, understanding the nuances of culture and discipline, things like that have been factors in safety decision-making historically, and that have made the ratio of Black and brown children coming into care so skewed. So there really has to be increased awareness, increased cultural competency and training so that the workforce is able to clearly identify what is culture and what is abuse and neglect. I still think there's room for education there.
Definitely. And it's something I've said before in another episode, is that, when it comes to neglect, especially when it hits the Black and brown community and so forth, the system has an ideology of what it looks like to have a modern family, what it looks like to be able to support a kid. And that that model, or whichever that they're going off of, does not fit or support the black single mom. That doesn't fit and support the black single dad, or the Latin, Hispanic or Mexican, or the refugee. That doesn't support
Exactly.
those type of
Exactly.
families. Especially because those type of families, those individuals are working multiple jobs, to support,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like we say as a system, that because you're poor, you're unfit to
Yeah.
be a parent.
Yeah.
But we're not going to do anything to help you.
Help you.
You know?
Yeah, to help you not be poor. Yeah, yeah,
Right,
exactly. Exactly.
right.
Yep.
But I kind of want to switch gears,
All right.
and you said that you were a foster and turned adoptive parent. So if you could tell us a little bit about that journey,
Yeah.
and how that started and how that's going.
Yeah. So amazing. So my husband and I started out back in, I think that was 2016. We became licensed as foster parents through a treatment foster care agency. We were foster to adopt. Yeah. And that, that's always an adventure, getting licensed, in that way. And it was something that I will say, I thought no one's more prepared for this than me, because this is what I do. Like, this is my thing. And man, it was hard, and so that gave me a newfound respect for foster parents and those who have done it long term, because it's not easy. It's not easy. And that's from someone who is trained and knows, many things in that realm. I mean, mind blowing. But then we really felt that our hearts were for adoption. And so we moved to strictly being adoptive parents. And we received our sweet daughter in March of 2020. Perfect, perfect storm of timing. But
Wow.
it has been the most amazing journey I think we could ever have. We knew that her birth mother was in a very tough situation, being young, being a single mom, facing incarceration and many tough things. And so she made a very selfless choice to allow our daughter to be adopted by us. And so we are thankful for her every day. It has opened us up to a deeper love than we could ever imagine. And so I am so grateful to her for making me a mother in that way. And I hope that in the future we will be able to have relationship with her, and have her sit at our table and share a meal and just watch our daughter grow and be a family together. So that is my hope in the future. But it's been a journey, but man, the most amazing journey that there could ever be.
Definitely, definitely, and that's just so inspiring to hear. My follow up question, because you mentioned in the heat of COVID, you adopted. So kind of referencing back to when we're talking before, my question, what has been your experience overall, but also working, being a parent, being a spouse, all the, like, how has that been for you throughout this experience of pandemic?
Yeah. Oh man, I think we can all just kind of, when we ask that question, we just kind of have a sigh of like, man, it's been an interesting couple years. And I will say, from a personal standpoint, um, kind of in this COVID time, it has really made me kind of snuggle in. I think I'm already kind of naturally an introvert, but it's really made me pull inwards and value my family and value time more than anything. Time is the most valuable thing we get, and it's finite. We don't get it back. So when we look back on these 2 years of being kind of isolated and away from the people we love, man, that's time we don't get back. So it's really made me look at time different, and look at how do I love people differently, and how do I show up in the ways that I can for the people I love. From a work standpoint, it has been really interesting to see that the work didn't stop. I think we all thought, especially in child welfare, where our work is going out and being with people, we thought, oh man, now that we can't do that, the work's going to stop. What is going to happen to kids? What is going to happen to families? How are we going to implement systems and family first and all of this? And it didn't stop. Work didn't stop. We found a way around it. And that speaks to the resiliency of the child welfare workforce. Although social workers and caseworkers sometimes get a tough rap, the resiliency of that workforce during this time has been amazing. So anybody in the workforce needs a pat on the back for that, because they continue to show up, they continue to protect and continue to serve people as they could, where they could. So I've been incredibly impressed that the work continued despite all the other factors. And for me, I've probably been busier than ever during this time, where we thought we'd all kind of coast into cruise control. Man, it's been full speed ahead, but it's a good thing because it's given people time to sit back and reflect and prioritize. And so I think that's been beneficial in the child welfare space as well.
Definitely, and kind of bouncing from that, because this kind of segues into that same question, mental health. You mentioned that you did some kind of self-evaluating throughout COVID, but even before the pandemic, COVID was a thing.
Yeah.
How did you prioritize self-care, mental health? And did that shift at any point? Like, because it just being real about it, some of us like, yeah, I ain't really do self-care, or I just thought, getting up, showering, brushing my teeth was it. That was it,
That was self-care.
So I'm interested in hearing, was there a shift? Was there any barriers throughout this journey? And what have you learned along it?
I would say for me, I had to be more intentional about self-care. Whereas before COVID, pre-COVID, self-care really looked like kind of, it was at your disposal. I could go to church and be amongst people and worship together. I could go to a yoga class. I could, care for myself in all the ways that feel really good for me at any time. Whereas when we shifted into COVID, and we were all kind of feeling the pressure of being stuck inside, of the uncertainty of like, can we go outside and breathe? Is that safe? It was crazy. But so I had to be really intentional about self-care, and my self-care is running. I'm a runner. And so just having that 30 minutes where I could just move my body, because we all became so sedentary. Also, in COVID times, we were all sitting in front of screens, or like me, spend a lot of time on the couch watching Netflix. So being intentional about movement was really part of my self-care, and it gave me time to just let my mind be free, and not worry about what's on the news, or worry about how am I going to take care of a kiddo in this very scary time? How am I going to make sure my senior citizen parents are safe and protected? But it allowed me to have time to just separate and kind of blank out and let my body move. And that was the best self-care. And I had to make time for that, literally scheduling it on my calendar, not available for this 30 minutes, so I could get out and do that, and being really, really purposeful about making that time was really how I got through. I say running is what made me get to the other side of COVID, for real.
I love that, and it's just, that aspect of keep moving, keeping yourself moving, keeping your mind moving, keeping your body moving, and setting aside that time to do that. I think that's very important to understand that we need to sometimes set aside time, even if an aspect like you're saying, like you were still doing something chilling, just watching Netflix. You still like that may not have been the self-care that was needed. So you still need to set aside time for what actually works for you and the means of self-care, So thank you for that. I have a couple more questions for you, and I just want to say, thank you for sharing and being with me today. Your experience, your journey, and the honesty of your experience is tremendously helpful to myself, and hopes that it's helpful to the audience too. My next couple questions are, what is next for yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. I think what's next is always evolving. I see myself as a servant leader, so I go where I am called. And I totally feel that God and the universe will put me where I need to be and where my service is needed. So where I am needed to serve people. So yeah, I am still consulting. Shameless plug, Zona Consulting. But still consulting with folks primarily around diversity, equity, and inclusion in human services, but also do some consulting around foster care and adoption. So I'm continuing to build in that space and continuing to just love and support people who are doing this work, who need the resources, who need the coaching and the encouragement. If it's just being a cheerleader and helping people get to the next level, that's what I'm here for. So I'm going to continue, to spread that everywhere I can, and continuing advocacy for the needs of families of origin. That's something that I remain committed to. So I've got a couple conferences coming up where I'll be speaking on some of these things. And so I'm really excited to just continue to bring light to the needs, particularly of families of origin, and elevating the lived experience and how we make decisions in child welfare.
Definitely. And I want you to, kind of, put that plug in. So how can people stay tuned and or get in touch with you, or, find your consulting agency or whichever? How can they, seek you out?
Yeah, well, please seek me out. So you can find me at zonaconsulting.com. It's XONA. Or you can have Anna. You can email me at anna@zonaconsulting.com. So ANNA@XONAconsulting.com. I'd love to hear from you, even if it's just to pick my brain. I do a lot of pro bono work, just helping people have conversations and kind of figure out next steps. So I am open to everything. So if you have questions about my journey, or want to just pick my brain for some ideas or thoughts around child welfare or DEI work in this space, I'm here for it.
Definitely. And lastly, what tips and tidbits or bits of advice do you have for the audience listening today?
Great. Yeah. For the audience listening today, I'll say for the child welfare leaders, I will say, make sure that you're honoring your workforce, bring them to the table in decision making. Do not forget that they are the ones who carry out the work. So as we implement new programs and services, and as we do new policies, make sure that the workforce is at the table. And then I would say, let data lead the way. As human services professionals, I went into this field because I don't do numbers, I don't do math, but man, we're at a time now, we got to let data lead us. We got to lean into that. So child welfare leaders, lean into the data, let the data guide your decision making, and let the data guide the practice. Numbers don't lie. So that's the best place to start in this child welfare reform. For our workforce, I would say really making a seat for yourself at the table. If there's not a seat there for you, bring a chair, bring a folding chair and put it up at the table, because your voice matters, because you're the ones that are working face to face with families, with kids, and you need to be at the table in decision making. So sometimes you have to make that good trouble in order to get that change that you need. And then I would also say for the workforce, embrace story. Take time to learn the stories of the people you serve, not just what's in the case record, but their story. Everyone wants to be seen and known. So make space for people to be seen and known, not just for what they have done or the mistakes they've made, but for who they are and how they show up in the world. And then lastly, for those with lived experience, continue advocacy, become those servant leaders that you needed when you were in the system. Be those people, be those feet, be the hands and feet that you needed to create change in this system, because your voice and your experience matters. It matters. It's the most important stakeholder that any agency has. So let your voice matter. Speak up, because it's needed.
Definitely. I appreciate that. You dropped a lot of nuggets right there.
All the things.
I definitely, take some of that for myself, and I hope the audience, take some of that too. Do you have any lasting comments for the audience, whichever, anything you want to say or leave?
Okay, my last comment is for you, is that I appreciate you allowing me to sit with you and share who I am and what I do, because I think what you're doing is so important and so amazing. You are allowing people to share their stories and have voice, and people that may otherwise go unnoticed. And so that doesn't fall short on me. And so I appreciate your heart and your dedication for what you're doing here. And I hope that it will continue, because it's important. These conversations and getting to know people like this is so important. So I hope you know that from now forward, you got a friend in me. And I hope that we will collaborate again in the future, because it truly has been a pleasure and a light and a blessing for me to have time with you today.
Definitely, definitely. And I look forward to staying connected and having you on again as this journey continues and as you continue on your work, possibly talking about some more of those things that you're passionate about in more detail going forward. But as our time concludes, this has been a pleasure. I just want to say again, thank you for the listeners. Thank you for being on here, and thank you for the guests that may have been on here that's listening to. I appreciate you guys. I wouldn't be able to do this without you guys, and I hope that I can continue to do this and continue to bring forth those voices that need to be heard, but also that need to be seen too. So without further ado, I say this spiel every time. COVID is here. It is out here. It's doing its thing. So we all got to do our part to take care of each other, whether that's you getting vaccinated, whether you not doing that, whichever. I'm not getting political. That's your choice. But remember to take care of yourself, wear a mask, sanitize, wash your hands, watch the protocols, and do what you need to do to maintain a safe and healthy community, because it just takes one of us doing it and we can help so many other people. Outside of that, you guys, this has been Resilient Voices and Beyond. Thank you for being there, supporting, and thank you for listening. I hope you guys have a good night, good morning, good evening, good whenever you're listening to this. Just let it be good and great. And that's all.